Number 10, Dr. Murrow. The interesting thing too about Dr. Murrow is that some spelling for this character is like Dr. Morrow, but if you actually look at the comic itself, it's Murrow with a U, so I believe it's Murrow with a U, but if you say Morrow and I say Murrow, that's also fine. I'm not gonna come for you. Dr. Murrow appears in the What If issue number 11 from the 1997 series. Here we answer the question, what if the Marvel Bullpen had been transformed into the Fantastic Four? Being from a different time period, there are definitely some extremely sexist tones in this issue. A lot of it aimed sadly at fabulous Flo Steinberg, who stands in for Invisible Woman. But another ridiculous aspect of this issue, aside from that more serious one, are some of the villains that we see the Bullpen version of the FF face off against. Like their first villain, Dr. Murrow. Dr. Murrow's island was the one that they planned on visiting before they were delivered some fan mail. Upon opening it up, they found a mysterious radio-like device which transformed them into the Fantastic Four, granting them powers after they were exposed to cosmic rays that the device emitted. Turns out that this was all part of a Skrull plot, which we find out later in the issue, and that Dr. Murrow was also a victim of a similar device. Oh no. But even with that, why did he attack them when they got to his island? Why is he a villain in all this? Why is he one of the first villains we run into? Did the transformation like make him, I don't know, just really mad or something? Or violent? The reality is they probably just wanted to start the issue off with a good fight and a bit of mystery, but still Murrow ends up being a pretty bizarre villain because of this. Because there's things that just aren't explained here. Oh well, I'm willing to come along for this strange ride in any What If.
At number 9 we have Matter Eater Lad. This guy has a pretty rough set of powers which allow him to metabolize just about anything he swallows. That's right, the enzymes in his stomach are so strong that he can break down and digest anything no matter how large, even if they're radioactive and or otherwise damaging. Now, although he is a pretty silly superhero, Matter Eater Lad isn't at the number 1 spot because I can in some sense see how this power might be of use in the right situation. For example, let's say you have to get rid of a bomb that's about to explode. The chances are that this guy will be able to eat that problem away. Or if you need to get rid of a parasite that's threatening to take over the world, he could simply gobble it up so it can't repopulate. So yes, on paper, a hero with superpowered stomach enzymes sounds like a total joke, but I would only say he's mostly a joke. At number 8 is Rainbow Girl. Hailing from the DC universe, Rainbow Girl has the ability to use the colors of the rainbow to take on any human emotion she desires on command. Red represents anger, blue, hope, and green, willpower, and they all make up a pretty bad superhero, if we're being honest. Online, this character is even viewed as a symbol of an older time when male writers were a lot more simplistic and offensive with their portrayals of female characters. And if these emotion-driven powers based on the colors of the rainbow don't hit that home, her pheromone shield should be a hint that this is true, since that power is used to make her the most popular girl around. At number 7 is Skin. This guy just creeps me out. I've covered him before. Mainly because of how gross his powers are, as well as his name, but also because of how depressing and off-putting he looks in every panel that he appears in. Angelo Espinosa, aka Skin, has access to about 6 feet of extra skin that he can use to stretch around his enemies or use as a rope to swing around with. He's basically like Reed Richards, except his bones and muscles don't stretch along with his skin, and also Mr. Fantastic's limit doesn't stop at 6 feet. Skin is just a very unfortunate hero who might wish that he'd never gotten superpowers to begin with. At number 6 is Color Kid. This superhero has powers just as his name suggests, and not much more. He has the ability to change the color of anything on command. Part of the Legion of Substitute Heroes and the assistant to a scientist on his home planet, Color Kid always seems to be in the shadow of greatness. And unfortunately, his powers don't help this cause very much either. Being able to change the color of anything isn't really such a useful power and often proves to disappoint his teammates, especially in combat situations. At number 5 is Arm Fall Off Boy. This guy is pretty clearly a gag character, but he's technically part of the official DC universe, so he's fair game for the list. Arm Fall Off Boy, worse name, has the incredible ability to detach his limbs and use them as melee weapons. As gross and as weird as this power is, it seems like he at least believes in himself, which is something. In one panel, we see him proudly popping his left arm off with a big plorp sound, preparing onlookers to be, quote, astounded by his power. He obviously doesn't have a huge backstory, so it's hard to expound too much on him, but he definitely makes history for being one of the worst heroes, if nothing else. At number 4 is the one and only, the infamous Bailey Hoskins, with the power to self-destruct. This is one of the more tragic superheroes who ends up losing his life after only 4 issues when he finally uses his power. We can assume that this character should land on a list like this every time, considering the comic book series that he's featured in is literally titled X-Men Worst X-Man Ever. But to be fair, this miniseries is known to be a pretty epic read considering the stakes at hand during the run. Bailey has to decide whether or not he's going to use his powers when an evil mutant dictator threatens to take over. At number 3 we have the people of New York City. Yes, even though it's hard to imagine calling them superheroes, at one point, the people of NYC are endowed with a very subtle power given to them by Reed Richards. And the power is to be able to tell which direction is north at all times. This is a response to the Spider Island evil plan set by Jackal, where he unleashes an army of little bugs that give people Spider-Man's powers. So to put everyone back on even keel, Richards decides that everyone should be turned into superheroes. The only thing is that to keep things simple, the ability given to the population of the city is so lame that it has gone down as one of the worst superpowers of all time, and has forced the innocent people of New York City to appear on this rather embarrassing list. At number 2 we have Dog Welder. Now, aside from this guy having one of the worst superpowers of all time, I also just think he's one of the worst superheroes based on who he is as a person. If you're a dog person, skip ahead to the next section because basically this bozo goes around and kills dogs that he finds in alleyways and then calls it a superpower to weld them to people's faces. And he's still considered a good guy. Now, I don't really understand the joke here, but if it is a joke, it's so over the top and weird that I don't even get it. I feel like DC was trying to come up with a meme character here for a laugh, but I don't like the part where he's just killing dogs, nor do I even get it at all. Dog Welder is a big thumbs down in my books, and I think he rightfully deserved a spot high on this list. Shame on you, Dog Welder. At number 1 is the silliest, worst superhero of all, with respect, J. Pennington Pennypacker, aka the Almighty Dollar. Living most of his life as an average citizen working as an accountant, Pennypacker eventually attends the Run-amok Self-Esteem Camp, which turns out to be the most fateful decision he's ever made. After attending the camp for a time, we learn that it's all just a front for a mysterious scientist who's working on completing a device that could give anyone superpowers. And when J. Pennington Pennypacker is endowed with his own powers, he's given an ability that's perfectly suited for his ridiculous name. He is, from that moment onwards, endowed with the ability to shoot pennies out of his wrists at high velocities. Although he only appears in one issue of Marvel's NFL Super Pro back in 1992, the Almighty Dollar is technically an official part of the Marvel canon and must be treated as such. At number 10 is the infamous Gold Balls, aka Egg. Mentioned a handful of times already on this channel, Gold Balls is one of the more bizarre mutants to be given as much panel time as he has. Part of the new generation of mutants, Fabio Medina can summon golden balls on command, which don't actually have any destructive or useful properties whatsoever, at least on their own. Although it is soon discovered that when combined with the powers of 4 other mutants, Gold Balls is able to create a force field of immortality that can resurrect fallen mutants and protect others from death on the island of Krakoa. So there is, after all, a pretty impressive use for Fabio's abilities, but only when paired with the powers of 4 other mutants. On his own, he just squeezes onto this list.
Number 9, Forget-Me-Not. Forget-Me-Not basically has the power of me in high school. His abilities allow him to basically be unnoticeable, so much so that he had been on the X-Men roster for 6 years and no one remembered it. As an X-Men, he battled the Brood and fought in the Age of X story, and has honestly saved their behinds on more than one occasion before he actually first appeared in X-Men Legacy number 300 in March of 2014. He is literally both real and not real at the same time, which is a concept I am just too dumb to properly explain. He played a key role in X-Force Volume 4 number 10 in 2014 when the X-Men tried to get him to help with one of the key conflicts being quote unquote how can they hope to find a mutant who slips out of memory whenever he leaves their sight? Only problem is, he can't control his powers at all. So how do we prove he even exists? I mean, other than him actually being legitimately written in the comics, his actions and use of things can be perceived, like his use of toilet paper, allowing people to logically conclude that he could exist. Also, his powers were shown to leave distortions on camera records. I don't know how cameras forget him, but it's a comic book, so give me a break. A few mutants could detect him, like Phantom X, who said Forget-Me-Not was overweight, which is kind of rude.
At number 8, we have Skin. First off, the name. It's like a writer coined this name at 4 AM after forgetting they had a deadline the next morning. And the powers are equally bizarre. He's basically able to stretch his skin by about 4 to 6 feet and use it to swing around or tie up bad guys. He's like Mr. Fantastic, except it's only his skin, so I imagine it's like a little less durable and he probably can't pull the guys in as strong as if they were actually his limbs. And in my opinion, the worst of it is that when Skin is just hanging out and not actively holding in his skin, it just hangs off of him at its longest length, with his skeleton staying the same size, which is kinda gross. It's like a beanbag chair but without any filling, and instead of styrofoam beads, it's a full-on skeleton and organs. He's also a nightmarish pale blue-gray, which, I don't know, they could have at least made him look healthy, you know? Anyway, Skin at number 8.
Number 7, Eye-Boy. Not the first or last mutant to be called the lamest mutant ever, Trevor Hawkins developed his mutant ability after the Avengers vs. X-Men war in Wolverine and the X-Men number 19 in 2012. And, well, his mutation is that Trevor is covered from head to toe in dozens of eyes. It's creepy, it's weird, it's actually more useful than you might think. Microscopic, telescopic, X-ray, night, infrared, and thermal vision are all things he is capable of. He can also detect chemicals, is an excellent marksman, and is skilled in nonverbal communication. He can basically read other people's behaviors and body language to almost read their minds, predict attacks, and read people's histories. All Sherlock Holmes-like. He can pinpoint weak spots in machines and people, is able to see past illusions and disguises, but to top it all off, the craziest and newest addition to his powers is solar blasts, meaning Trevor can emit intense bursts of bright yellow energy and focused beams of extrastellar force that cause sunburns and radiation poisoning. So yeah, Eye-Boy looks really weird, sure, but he'll tell you your deepest insecurities and then blast you with radiation, so there's that.
At number 6 is Quire. Quire, aka Irina Clayton, wasn't ever part of the X-Men, but studied at the School for Gifted Children, which I'm gonna count, for the simple reason that I wanted to talk about her. First appearing in the new X-Men issue number 119, Quire just has mouths all over her body, and the function for it is very unclear. In some cases, she's able to confuse her enemies by shouting things in all directions, but that's about it as far as I can tell. And I'm honestly not leaving anything out, that's really it. It's unfortunate because in these cases, the use of the word mutant becomes that much more accurate. Like, Quire is one of those X-Men that I feel badly for. Superpowers are supposed to be cool and make us wish that we could have them too, but this one is just, it's like a curse, you know what I mean? But honestly, that sort of goes for everyone on this list, and at least Quire seems like a competent and friendly person. So don't get me wrong, she could still have potential. Power doesn't always come from brute force, you know, it can also be achieved by becoming a good strategist or tactician, which she'll have plenty of mouths to yell orders at people, I'm sure. At least.
Number 5. Fabio Medina. Although he had thought himself and his powers ridiculous, which they kind of are, if we're being honest, Fabio Medina and his battle cry, "Gold balls!" is kind of awesome actually. Fabio can produce golden balls of different sizes that shoot out from any part of his body and make the sound poink each time they hit something. The golden balls he fires actually seem to bounce. Now, ask me why this is a useful genetic mutation. Go ahead, ask away. But prepare yourself because he gets more weird. After he moved to Krakoa with other mutants, it was discovered that Goldball's balls are actually infertile eggs. And if these eggs are made fertile, it could allow for unlimited resurrection of the mutant race. Yes. So, the golden balls he was firing out of his body at sentinels and antagonists were actually infertile bouncy golden eggs. I don't like this. But he did become a member of the Five that combined their powers to resurrect deceased mutants, and that was pretty cool.
At number 4 is Beak. Beak, or Barnell Bowhusk, is a creation of Grant Morrison, first appearing in his new X-Men series, and he is basically a bird person, but in a more literal sense than any of us asked for. He's got hollow bones, feathers, and a beak, and he can't even fly really, he can just glide briefly, which in my opinion it's not worth the hassle of the rest of what he's got going on. He does have talons and long range vision, so there's some kind of offensive potential there, and apparently he's really nice too, which I guess makes up for the fear he strikes in the hearts of many. I like to imagine that beak was created accidentally when Grant Morrison pitched a character that was half bird, half human, thinking he was on the phone with his character designer, but he'd actually called David Cronenberg instead. Poor Barnell Bohusk, I feel badly for him, honestly. Even his real name, Barnell Bohusk? Anyway.
Number 3. Dupe. If you have not heard of Dupe, well then allow me to enlighten you. This weird looking bumpy green bean thing will put his hand on your chest. The product of a Cold War US military experiment instrumental in the fall of the Soviet Union. Somehow, Dupe is unable to learn English, and as such he speaks in a language all of his own that everyone somehow can eventually understand. Although Captain America says the US government created him in a secret weapons project, he is also apparently from a place called Marginalia. It's surprising that he is a member of the X-Men considering he isn't technically a mutant. As far as I know at least. But the most surprising thing is his list of powers. He has possible omniscience, he's strong and durable enough to do battle with and defeat Thor, he can heal from super serious wounds in seconds and resurrect himself, he is crazy fast, he has size alteration, energy projection, psionic abilities, he can perform dupish magic, and has the power of the funk. And last but not least, Dupe's body contains a nightmare dimension known as Dupeland that he can trap people in and summon monsters from. And if you want to count it, he even has the power of looking like a really angry mix between a lima bean and a pickle. So there's that.
At number 2 is Ugly John. He's not technically part of the X-Men, okay? But he's a mutant who's been on their side for his whole run in the comics. And honestly, I just wanted to include the weirdest Marvel character I've ever heard of. He's got 3 faces. And that's it. He doesn't last for long, first appearing in New X-Men issue number 114, when he's saved by Wolverine and Cyclops from a Sentinel who captures him. After being saved from captivity, he's then probably captured again by the Wild Sentinels and is critically injured in this incident. I don't know why Ugly John is such an asset to the Sentinels, but I imagine it really tested the whole no man left behind philosophy for the X-Men. He really puts the other X-Men in some serious danger as they save him for a second time, this time with his life threatened by injury. And unfortunately for Ugly John, he's so badly injured that Cyclops actually puts him out of his misery. I know. It's very dark, but don't blame me, blame Grant Morrison. I just wish the world had at least given this 3-faced mutant a break by allowing him a nicer name.
Number 1. Bailey Hoskins. How does this normal looking ginger wind up as the number 1 spot on our list? Bailey Hoskins from Earth TRN 656, otherwise known as Exceptional, was from the non-ironically titled X-Men Worst X-Men Ever 5-issue story from 2016. Now what are his powers? Bailey has the greatest power of self-detonation. He can blow up! Just once. And then he moves on to the eternal plane of death. So how do we find out about his mutant ability if he can't really use it? Well, his parents are both mutants. His mother has X-ray vision and his dad can quote unquote fry an egg on his chest if he wanted to. Cool. They visit the Xavier Institute where Beast breaks this poor potential X-Man's young heart by letting him know his utterly depressing power. Not too long after that, when deciding to walk away from the school for mutants, his parents, the only thing he says he has left, gets stepped on by a Sentinel. He joins the school and basically fails at everything he tries to do, using a mech armor, being an intern, joining the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, and the world eventually becomes an apocalypse ruled by a fellow mutant, Riches. In the end, fueled by the fact that he has been a failure his entire life, Bailey finally uses his power to bring down Riches and finally do something actually exceptional. Good job.
At number 10, we have Maggot. This guy gives me the creeps, and for good reason. He basically has 2 carnivorous worms on either one of his shoulders that devour anything on command. And they don't do it just as an offensive attack, but so that they can harvest the energy of the target and return it to Maggot's stomach, offering him a temporary boost of strength and durability. Honestly, this guy could come off as cool in some weird way to some people, but to me, his powers are just too gross and too much of a hassle to even be worth it. Most superheroes just have super strength and durability as a base set of powers, and Maggot, well, he has to get his worms to eat someone just to get those basic abilities, and only temporarily too. The weirdness factor for this mutant comes from his look, but also from the strange lengths he has to go to just to get on an even keel of power to most of his peers.
Number 9. Disappointed Loki. In the What If story, What If the Hulk Had the Brain of Bruce Banner, we get to see what would happen if the Hulk had kept Banner's wits and then ran into Loki's illusion, you know, with the train tracks and such. Turns out this version of the Hulk was too smart to fall for Loki's trap. Seeing the TNT on the train tracks, but believing it to be an illusion, meant that he would never be put onto a collision course with the Avengers and therefore would never join that team. Instead, Loki ends up disappointed, and Banner goes on to fight against Galactus, joining with Professor X and Reed Richards to create the new and extremely powerful uni-being of X-Man. Poor Loki though, he's like, but I set this trap in. Alright. I guess not all traps are winners. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to show some support for us on other platforms, head on over to Facebook, give us a like, give us a follow, it does help us out, and we're gonna have lots of exciting new content coming for you over there. Exciting. Number 8. Fake Captain America. Both weird and great in a lot of ways. Fake Captain America was William Burnside. Now, while William Burnside does exist in the 616 universe, where he was a well-meaning Captain America imposter driven mad by improper use of the super soldier serum, in the What If reality of Earth 84444, he ended up becoming obsessed with communists, paranoid that they could be lurking around every corner, which is kind of what happened in the main continuity, but in this one, he's less like, oh no, it's just the super soldier serum, and more like he made some conscious choices here. Modeling America into less of a democracy under the name of Captain America, Burnside would be beaten back by the real Captain America, who in this story doesn't resurface until 1984, which means that Burnside has a lot of time to basically do harm to the American image and the influence of the nation's people. This warning story and the speech the real Cap gives at the end are both still pretty relevant today, which is why this is like a great issue, but also why it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird how there's a lot of stuff in this that I feel like is still relevant, even though it's from 1984. Do we ever do new things, or does history just cycle in like some vicious loop? Probably that. Number 7. Colonel Bruce Banner. What if Bruce Banner was actually the monster and Hulk was just purely the good guy? Well, that is the question we dive into in issue 91 of the 1989 series. Here, Bruce Banner mistreats his wife, Betty Ross, who eventually becomes, of course, Betty Banner. Bruce is cruel and unkind, but after he is involved in a gamma radiation explosion, another half of him emerges, a glowing green, light-like figure who is gentle and kind and we know as Starman. Basically, this world's Hulk. And he was actually terrified of Bruce himself. Not only is this villain pretty interesting, unique, and strange, but the story is also like epically sad. Despite Betty reaching out for help to both her father and others around her, it seems that no one actually really believes Betty when it comes to the fact that like Bruce mistreats her. In the end, she is confined to a mental institution as she's believed to have gone insane. But at least there she appears to be safe from Bruce and his cruelty, so it's like a sad but I guess sort of happy ending. It's bittersweet is what it is. Ugh. Number 6. Mr. Fantastic. So, Mr. Fantastic in this story is still Reed Richards, but he's also Doctor Doom. Let me explain. In issue number 6 of the 1997 What If series, we get to explore an alternate world where the Fantastic Four were granted different powers. These powers seem to have been inspired more by their personality traits. As such, Reed Richards becomes a big brain. Literally, he's just a brain. Instead of him staying as a big disembodied brain though, with mental or psionic capacities, if you will, he ends up being convinced by Doctor Doom to go with him so that Doom might help him by using his knowledge of robotics to build him a humanoid body. You know that when Doom is like, please, let me help you, Reed Richards, that's not what's about to happen. In reality, Doom's plan is to use Reed's powerful brain form to power his time travel machine. The Fantastic Four come to save Reed and a battle ensues, eventually resulting in a massive explosion when Doom attempts to activate his machine. Just as the explosion goes off though, Reed manages to use his mental brain powers to move his mind into Doom's body. As a result, Doom, which I assume Doom moves into Reed's brain form, ends up dead, and Reed lives on, but within the scarred body of Dr. Doom. So now it just looks like Doom is leading the FF. Pretty cool, but also pretty weird. Number 5. Space Admiral Von Strucker. In the What If story from issue number 14 of the 1977 series, we answer the question, what if Sergeant Fury had fought World War II in outer space? Turns out that events would be, as expected, pretty weird. The whole premise is that on this alternate Earth, humans got to space a lot sooner and ended up being pulled into a conflict where they fought against the Baytans. Strucker himself was an admiral. Strucker would end up on the side of humanity, but would ultimately betray humankind and Earth to ally himself with the Baytans. He saw an opportunity for Germany, who he was more loyal to than, just Earth in general, even though, Germany's part of Earth, so I feel like maybe an interesting choice on his part. Basically, he believed that if the Baytans took over as their allies, Germany would be in a better place than they were now, so he decided to betray his fellow space soldiers, which actually I guess kinda does make sense considering everything that happened after World War I. Space wars are always fun and weird though, and this story and its antagonists are, of course, no exception. Number 4. Hypnofish. The Hypnofish that appears in What If issue number 1 from the 1977 series is actually a character that has appeared in the main continuity. A character? A type of fish? Whether there is only a single Hypnofish or more than one. This is a character who has only made a few appearances in even the main continuity since their first 616 appearance in 1963 in Fantastic Four issue number 14. But they also appear as Namor the Submariner's villainous ally in the first What If issue, where we answer the question, what if Spider-Man had joined the Fantastic Four? The end result is that Namor successfully uses his Hypnofish friend to kidnap Sue Storm, but instead of being rescued as she was in issue number 14 of FF, she ends up staying with Namor and ultimately becoming his queen, all because Spider-Man is on the team, which leaves her kind of feeling like isolated from them. In the end, his Hypnofish and Mentofish plot is successful, and Sue chooses to remain with Namor. Also, yes, there are also Mentofish. That's a thing too. An even more rare thing than Hypnofish, I believe. Number 3. Loki, Prince of Jotunheim. Another one of my favorite episodes from Marvel's and Disney Plus's What If series, for just how lighthearted and adorable it was one that asked the question, what if Thor were an only child? The answer was that Thor would basically be kind of a well-loved brat who was obsessed with partying as opposed to heroics. Not only did we get Party Thor in this episode though, we also got friendly frost giant Loki, who is also known of course as the Prince of Jotunheim. Instead of Loki being adopted by Odin and growing up to be the villain we normally know him as, the sort of jealous and vengeful brother of Thor, he becomes Thor's best friend and ally, who also seems to enjoy a good party. And I gotta say, I kinda love it. Super weird and super great. Number 2. Galactus. Galactus is a pretty complex character. Sometimes he's a villain, at times he's been a hero. Currently, I'm pretty sure in the main continuity he's dead and his corpse is maybe being used as part of Thor's throne room, but either way, when it comes down to it, despite being a cosmic inevitability, Galactus often threatens entire worlds with his hunger, which, it feels pretty villainous. And yet even he can end up with a happy ending where he gets to enjoy the simple life. All it takes is for Thanos to use the Infinity Gauntlet to wipe his mind and send him to Earth to live as a human. Hey, it's so easy. In this story, this attempt to neutralize Galactus results in him being recognized, despite his amnesia, as Elvis. This is because Galen in his human form happens to sound and look just like Elvis, coincidentally. When Adam Warlock finds him after defeating Thanos and offers to return Galactus to his prior form and power, he actually refuses and decides to live out his days on Earth with his new partner Gertrude and her son, basically filling in as the planet's, Elvis replacement following the mysterious death of the real Elvis. Which, fair enough. If I came to Earth and then people thought I was Elvis, I'd probably be like, you know what, I think I'm good, I'll just chill here, this is a pretty good life. Number 1. Juggernaut. In this bizarre What If issue, we ask the question, what if Professor X of the X-Men had become the Juggernaut? Which is a strange question and is also a great question. Obviously, instead of his brother Cain Marko. Obviously, who is normally the Juggernaut. This story takes place in the pages of issue 13 of the 1989 What If series. Here we see that Professor X is trapped under the rubble of the caved-in tomb where Cyttorak's gem awaited an avatar. So Charles becomes the avatar of Cyttorak and not only gains great physical power, but has his psychic mutant power basically increased as well. Because he was not around to form the X-Men, the Fantastic Four fight against Magneto in their place, which causes anti-mutant hysteria as a result. In response, when Juggernaut surfaces, he creates his own team of mutants to enforce anti-human laws in response. Woo! Becoming a powerful villain as opposed to friend and ally of humankind. Would have gone a lot differently.